chronic pain impacts millions of Americans.
As far as prevalence, the numbers vary. Somewhere between 20% and 35% of folks have chronic pain.
And while the source of pain may vary,
some of it's musculoskeletal, some of it's more nerve-based, lots of similarities between these, but also lots of interesting distinctions.
There's one important consistency.
Despite where your pain is, all pain is actually experienced in the brain.
Paving the way for an innovative, immersive pain therapy.
The focus of our program is teaching people to repattern their nervous system and to be able to live their life despite the pain that they have.
Discover a virtual reality treatment for real chronic pain inside this edition of CTSI Discovery Radio. Welcome to CTSI Discovery Radio. I'm your host, Brian Belmer. CTSI Discovery Radio is brought to you by the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeast Wisconsin. The CTSI is a consortium of researchers, doctors, scientists, and others representing 8 institutions, including the Medical College of Wisconsin, Milwaukee School of Engineering, Marquette University, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Children's Wisconsin, Froedtert Hospital, Versity Blood Center of Wisconsin, and the Zablocki VA Medical Center. The CTSI works collaboratively across all of our member institutions. Our mission is advancing health through research and discovery. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 50 million adults in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain. And because pain is mostly subjective and invisible, it presents challenges, from diagnosing and treating it to understanding and living with chronic pain. While there are many pharmacological and surgical treatments, today we discover an alternative option to solve chronic pain through immersive therapy utilizing virtual reality. To learn more, we spoke with Dr. Todd Maddox, Vice President of Research and Development at Applied VR, a leading innovator in virtual reality-based therapeutics. Dr. Maddox first explains what chronic pain is.
It does have a lot to do with duration. The pain has to be persistent, and it has to be recurrent, and it has to last for an extended time. Some studies will use a 3-month time frame, others use 6 months, but I can tell you that the majority of the people that you end up testing have been in chronic pain for quite a long time, 5, 6, 7, 15, 20 years.
And in addition to duration of the pain, location of the pain.
Acute pain is localized. If I hit my knee and I'm in pain, it's coming from my knee. Chronic pain, although it may have initiated from a particular location, it may have started in my knee, the fact is chronic pain is not localized. And that's a really important distinction. Chronic pain in a lot of ways is represented in the brain. It may start with your knee, but it could also be much more generalized. It doesn't have to be location-based long-term.
What then are the most common forms of chronic pain?
The company that I work with, Applied VR, we are FDA authorized for chronic low back pain, a type of chronic musculoskeletal pain, chronic knee pain, chronic hip pain, chronic shoulder pain, or chronic back pain. Those are all forms of musculoskeletal pain. You can contrast musculoskeletal pain with things like neuropathic pain. It's basically nerve pain, which is a very different form of chronic pain.
And there are other forms of chronic pain.
There's something called fibromyalgia, which is a widespread musculoskeletal pain. So you might have a tenderness at a specific location in the body, but it's actually sort of more broadly represented. And there's something called referred pain. I might think my chronic pain is in my back, whereas actually it's in another location, but I feel it or sense it in my back. The pain is actually coming from a particular location, but your sensation of that pain is in a different location.
So, suffice to say, chronic pain isn't unitary.
Some of it's musculoskeletal, muscles and bones. Some of it's more nerve-based. So Lots of different kinds, lots of similarities between these, but also lots of interesting distinctions still being studied.
How common is chronic pain? Just how many adults are experiencing it in the U.S.?
As far as prevalence, the numbers vary. I've seen numbers as low as 20%, which frankly is still quite a large number, up to a third. So somewhere between 20% and say 35% of folks have chronic pain.
And while conventional wisdom may lead you to believe,
oh, well, it's mostly older people, it is true that the prevalence of chronic pain increases the older you get, but you would be blown away by how many young, healthy, scrapping people have chronic pain.
so much so that it's not an exaggeration to characterize it as a public health crisis.
I would argue it is a public health crisis. It certainly negatively impacts people's quality of life. Because it impacts your quality of life, it's going to impact productivity and these kinds of things. So I do believe that it's a public health crisis. And it's sort of hidden in some respects, right? You don't see chronic pain in somebody walking down the street, even if they're suffering from it.
Typical or traditional treatments for chronic pain have included pharmacological options. However,
we know about the opiate epidemic. Opioids heavily prescribed for chronic pain. It's safe to say overprescribed. What are the problems? Addiction. That said, there are plenty of people where opiates work. It takes the edge off. It decreases the magnitude of that chronic pain so that you're feeling well enough to function.
perhaps the best that can be said about pharmacological treatments is
works for some people, doesn't work for others. I think the higher level point that is really important to make is chronic pain is not just a physical phenomenon. And many of the pharmacologic interventions like opiates or NSAIDs, their mechanism of action is physical.
And even in cases where pharmacological treatments are somewhat effective,
pain is biological, but it's also psychological and it's also social. It's really this trifecta, and people talk about chronic pain as a bio-psycho-social phenomena. Your typical pharmacologic interventions are only going to influence the biological component. It's missing some of the other important components.
what about surgical treatments for chronic pain?
Everything that we talked about with respect to pharma applies with surgicals. For some people, it's like, wow, it changed my life. This is amazing. This is the greatest thing that ever happened. And for other people, it's like, nothing has changed. If anything, it's worse. So it's hit or miss.
Why is that the case? Two factors. First,
it depends on what kind of chronic pain you have. If it's a chronic musculoskeletal pain, that may work just fine. On the other hand, if it's neuropathic, that's going to be more challenging surgically.
and second,
To the biopsychosocial point, those are only influencing the biological component of chronic pain, which, if that works, great. But when it doesn't, it's probably at least partially due to the fact that there are other aspects of chronic pain that aren't being treated.
so instead of, or in addition to, these traditional treatments, there's Applied VR.
Applied VR is a medical device company. Our virtual reality device is actually classified as a medical device. The medical device is low risk, non-pharmacologic, and it's FDA authorized as an add-on therapy for chronic low back pain. The therapy is safe, it works, it's really easy to use, and you can use it in your house.
What exactly is the technology utilized in Applied VR's treatment for chronic pain? It starts with a VR headset.
There are a lot of virtual reality headsets. We use a device called the Pico. It's gaze-based. Where you look, your fixations drive what happens in the headset. So that's on the hardware side.
As far as how that hardware works,
Think of it as a computer. You can put it in front of your eyes, kind of like a scuba mask, but instead of being clear, inside that mask are two lenses, one for each eye. Images are projected onto those lenses from the computer, and the content that's presented to those lenses inside that headset that you're wearing leads your brain to think that you are in another reality, a virtual reality.
so for example,
I might put a virtual reality headset on, and I might be dropped right in the middle of Paris. And I see the Eiffel Tower one direction, and I look the other direction, and I see something else. I'm in another reality. Physically, I'm not in another reality, but I've put this headset on and it's dropped me into this other location, and my brain is saying, I know I'm sitting in my chair, but man, it sure feels like I'm somewhere else. And that's the virtual component. Your brain really believes that you're somewhere else.
Then, on the therapy side,
non-pharmacologic therapies for chronic pain in general have been studied for decades. Things like cognitive behavior therapy, meditation, mindfulness, deep breathing. Breathing's a big one for dealing with pain. What Applied VR has done is taken those therapies that have been studied for decades, and we've identified foundational principles that you can build virtual reality content around.
take deep breathing, for instance.
There are certain kinds of breathing patterns that really relax people and help cope with pain. Let's build that breathing pattern into a virtual reality experience to develop that breathing pattern from the nature of the VR environment in front of you, and then you'll be able to use that breathing pattern going forward. So the innovation is in taking those therapies, identifying foundational principles that we can present within VR, and building the habits patients need to manage their chronic pain.
Making Applied VR a blend of the innovative and new with the tried and true.
It's a mix of VR and that innovation, but borrowing from the decades of work from pain psychologists, building that content in this innovative medical device.
What happens in Applied VR's treatment program for pain management utilizing their VR device? Dr. Maddox explains.
Here are some of the things that set what we do apart. There are a lot of devices out there that have a lot of distraction-based content, relaxation-based content, but where the patient gets to decide what they want to do today. My belief, and I think our data support this, is what patients want isn't very often what they need.
Instead, with Applied VR's program,
we have a fixed sequence of VR experiences. It's actually 56 experiences in a fixed sequence. The dosage is one experience per day. The experiences range from 2 to 15 minutes in length with an average duration of 6 minutes. So on average, 6 minutes a day in VR daily over the course of 56 days. So it's a pretty modest lift.
where there is flexibility is when and where a patient receives their treatment, because that's self-managed.
The best time to do it is when you're going to do it. If it's better to do it right before bed, then do it right before bed. If it's better for you to do it in the morning when you wake up, do it then. By self-managed, we simply mean with this device, you can do this in the comfort of your home. It's more convenient. You're going to be more likely to do it. The fact is, it's consistent. Everybody gets high-quality therapy because the therapy never changes, whereas we know that human beings have good days and bad days.
Next is the how, as in, how does the VR technology work in treating chronic pain?
The how is really the secret sauce. When I put that VR headset on and I'm transported to this virtual reality, my brain is telling me, you're somewhere else. Yeah, I know I'm sitting in my chair, but if I let go of that just a little bit and go with what I'm seeing in front of me, I think I'm somewhere else.
But what does that mean with respect to the brain's role in chronic pain?
It means that the sensory regions of my brain, the perceptual regions of the brain, the part of my brain that says, this is the environment I'm in, those parts of the brain are active. They're being engaged. Behavioral centers can't be activated with the right VR content. In other words, I can build skills in VR to help me mitigate my pain, things like the breathing that I talked about.
And because VR is so engaging and motivating, it means
These limbic centers in the brain are active. Sort of your motivation, your reward centers are active in the brain. And of course, cognition is active. So when you go into VR, your brain is sort of broadly activated.
so when the VR content is focused and built on proven therapies for chronic pain management,
Then your brain is going to be broadly active in the interest of chronic pain therapy. That cannot be understated. That is a huge win for the brain in this VR device.
and since Applied VR's therapy program is a predetermined, fixed sequence,
We repeat foundational principles. So, for example, you'll get multiple breathing experiences across the 56 sessions. You're getting this repetition in this brain that's broadly activated. You're going to learn these skills and habits.
plus, considering chronic pain is represented broadly in various regions of the brain,
These chronic pain centers in the brain overlap a lot with the brain regions that are active when you're in VR. So you're activating the brain when you're viewing this VR therapy that we've built, and those are the brain regions that are involved in chronic pain. You're adjusting the brain to reduce the negative impact in the interest of helping you address and manage your chronic pain.
In effect, empowering patients to manage their pain.
Absolutely. Let's face it, with a pill, you take the pill and then it's like, well, hopefully it works. Whereas with therapies like this, it is going to teach you how to manage your pain. Patients who have used the device feel like, you know what, I have some control now. If I'm having a bad day or I feel like an episode coming on, I'm empowered. That's one of the biggest strengths of this product.
The efficacy of applied VR isn't just Dr. Maddox's opinion. It's supported by data from extensive scientific research.
Before people get a VR headset, we ask them to rate their pain before they start the treatment. Pain is subjective. So I asked somebody, in the last 24 hours, how intense has your pain been on a scale from 0 to 10? We then have them go through the 56-session program, and we ask them the same question at the end. And then we look at how much their pain rating goes down over the course of the 56 sessions in our program.
He stresses two key findings, consistent between multiple research studies.
First, the average pain reduction was at least 2 points or greater. 2 points is really important clinically because it's been determined that a 2-point reduction in pain is what's called clinically meaningful. Your quality of life is significantly better. You can feel it. You may still have pain, but it's less, and your life is better than it was before.
And the second key finding,
because you might ask, what about when the therapy's over? Does their pain come back? No. The therapy builds skills and habits to help people manage their pain. We have tracked people out to 2 years, and we're still seeing reductions in how intense their pain is. Now, the reductions aren't as great as they were at the end of the treatment, so, just like when you get a prescription and you refill it. Some people may need to refill, and we're training skills and habits that you can use after you've sent the device back.
Where do we go from here?
I think the future is really rosy. The technology, the device itself is going to get better. The technology in the devices, the size of the devices, the ease of use of the device, the storage power, the computing power is going to be off the charts. The quality of the image is going to improve. I think really the sky's the limit on the technology side.
And on the therapy side,
we have only begun. Does it work as well across ages or genders or individuals with different kinds of chronic pain? We want to expand our label beyond chronic low back pain. So I think we're going to be able to treat a lot of different things with virtual reality besides chronic pain on the same headset.
Next, let's look back to discover how Applied VR came to use virtual reality in chronic pain management. For this, we turn to Josh Sackman, president and co-founder, who shares the circumstances of how he and his business partner, CEO and co-founder Matthew Stout, began Applied VR.
To give some background, I spent the first decade of my career in marketing and product and really found that the products that I loved had technology that could provide the tools, information, and connections with others to positively impact their lives. Learning how technology can support behavior change was a really formative part of my experience.
Josh says he came across virtual reality about 10 years ago.
And I came about it by chance through my father's market research firm. They had been discovering capabilities and trying to understand the non-conscious and emotion behind consumer decision-making and stumbled across VR as a tool to be able to see through people's eyes and collect new types of data and to really take a look through the non-conscious and emotion through the eyes in virtual reality.
One aspect of VR that really stood out to Josh was what he refers to as the power of presence.
This ability to put someone in a headset and transport them into a completely different state of mind. With those experiences, you could actually positively change behavior, even in the most complicated of situations of people grappling with addiction and PTSD and pain. I was completely fascinated. This was the next big computing platform that had some unique traits that other technologies couldn't do because they lacked this power of presence.
Hoping to fulfill a vision and seize an opportunity in the VR space, Josh set out to
find a partner who complemented my background and found Matthew Stout, who was coming off of his journey of building a really innovative ad tech company. Matthew had experience raising capital, building distribution, a strong background in finance and operations, and most importantly, we shared a vision, which is create positive impact through our work and try to create transformational change in society using technology.
And so, Applied VR was born, built on the premise that
let's not recreate the wheel. VR has such compelling research, but unfortunately that research and those discoveries have been confined to a laboratory. Proving something works in a trial or a lab lacks a lot of the things it takes for innovation to succeed and to translate that research and that R&D from a lab into the real world. That was the thesis of Applied VR. We're going to take proven innovation from a laboratory and bring it into the real world to solve big problems.
But Josh's interest in virtual reality, helping others with chronic pain, isn't just professionally motivated. It's personal as well.
I grew up with chronic pain, and personally living with pain impacted my life in a lot of ways. When I was 8 years old, when I would bend down and play with toys, my knee would lock up, and I found I had some congenital ligament issues and actually had a torn meniscus. When I went in for surgery, I got a staph infection, and I spent several weeks hospitalized.
Even after he was released from the hospital, his journey living with chronic pain was only beginning.
There were some complications from the surgery and follow-up surgeries to fix it. I was at home on antibiotics, separated from my classmates for a couple months. It was a pretty painful recovery, and that was the first of many encounters in healthcare, from some bad luck and having joints that dislocate and ligaments that tear easily.
Still, through his experience with chronic pain, he learned perseverance and understanding from those who treated him.
I fondly remember nurses and physical therapists and other people in my life because they played a role not in just helping me physically overcome the challenges I was facing, but psychologically and spiritually in a lot of places get back to a wellness in every sense of the word.
And, in time, inspiring and impacting his own career path.
Through my experiences of testing my physical boundaries, trying to rebel against some bad genetics, finding myself with injuries and recoveries, I realized I wasn't fulfilled and I was looking for work that would be fulfilling. And the missing piece that I came to realize was the work that I was doing was not creating that positive impact in other people's lives.
Fast forward to today, when Applied VR provides Josh the personal and professional fulfillment he desires.
It was that direct connection I was looking for, like the nurses and doctors and other people who helped me. But unlike the doctor and nurse who can have a one-to-one connection and impact, technology can have an impact on one-to-many and reach hundreds of thousands and millions of people all through a single application.
Many people think about VR technology primarily for gaming. Has it been challenging to change the perception of VR to a viable pain management tool?
Absolutely. We actually started with the question, is VR really necessary? Much like you see right now with AI, a lot of the early VR was selling on the novelty and hype. But the reality was, for even gamers spending hours at their computer playing, VR wasn't really conducive to that. Most of VR was spending 30 to 60 minutes, and most people couldn't tolerate more. And so even the promise of VR couldn't live up to the hype of gamers.
And while VR has proven successful and necessary as a pain management tool, some still remain skeptical.
When it comes to digital health innovation, it's really challenging because while we've developed and validated a clinical program that uses VR content, you still have to battle with the perception of why are we using VR and how do you deliver value above and beyond what you could achieve through simpler and more accessible technology.
But skeptics, take note. Applied VR's pain management program is working.
We built and developed a program to improve someone's health with Dr. Beth Darnall, who's a world-renowned pain psychologist out of Stanford, who's dedicated her career to developing digital interventions that provide access to tools that help with self-regulation and psychological coping for chronic pain patients, and running very large-scale clinical trials to validate those interventions.
Josh says team science is critical to their success.
It feels like once or twice a week, you're given impossible problems and situations that not any one person can solve on their own. and it requires a cross-disciplinary team with a strong culture and trust and communication to be able to deal with these problems.
But deal with challenges his team has, not the least of which
a little thing called the pandemic shut down all academic research in 2020, and all of a sudden, all non-COVID related research was indefinitely paused. And we had no idea of when this could start again.
So his team pressed on.
I'm so proud to be able to weather the storm. We had to figure out how to run our own clinical trial that would meet the rigor of FDA and the standards of academic medicine so that we can run a high-quality trial and get the nod of approval that the data met the requirements to evaluate the safety and efficacy of our product. We did that, and it's because of our team's ability to pivot and solve problems that we're able to succeed as a company at a very tough moment.
Still today, chronic pain sufferers sometimes face doubt from others who question whether the pain is real or just in the head. The truth is, pain is both real and in the head.
Pain is measured on a self-report basis, and despite where your pain is, all pain is actually experienced in the brain. But while there's a derogatory connotation to that, it's absolutely true. All pain goes through the central nervous system into the brain where pain receptors light up.
Dr. Todd Maddox agrees, adding,
Pain is absolutely real, and it's represented in your brain. They go together. It may start in your knee, but you're feeling it in your knee because you have a brain. The stigma about, it's all in your head, you're just making it up. It's not real. When people say that, they're devaluing what's going on in your head. What is going on in your brain is absolutely real. It's real because it exists in the brain, and we believe by utilizing this virtual reality device, yes, it is going to help you manage your pain as well. So might there be a stigma? Yes. What is the solution? Education.
And education is an integral aspect of Applied VR's chronic pain management program.
The focus of our program is to develop the skills and practices to improve your nervous system function through improved self-regulation using principles of biofeedback and mindfulness and diaphragmatic breathing, cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as developing psychological coping skills. And that's what we're doing. We're teaching people to be more accepting, to repattern their nervous system, and to be able to live their life despite the pain that they have.
If you are a chronic pain sufferer, Josh Sackman understands.
It's been remarkable finding a combination of practices that have made my life healthy, but it took decades to find all the things that keep me balanced. And so if you're new on the journey, don't do it alone. Be vulnerable, open up. It can take time. There is a lot of trial and error, but keep trying.
And Dr. Maddox says, don't give up.
I think a lot of chronic pain patients have given up. And that is not a fault of the patient. That is the fault of the healthcare system failing the patient. But I think there's hope because maybe pharma works. If it does, great. If surgery works, great. But if it doesn't, what Applied VR is doing is offering a non-pharma, non-surgical alternative. There is hope. Don't give up. Be skeptical, but give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, no harm, no foul. But if it helps at all, it can change your life.
Our reality is we're all out of time for this edition of CTSI Discovery Radio. As always, thanks to each of our guests for appearing on today's show, Dr. Todd Maddox and Josh Sackman. I hope you've discovered something by listening to today's show, and I'm doubly hopeful that you'll join us again next time. CTSI Discovery Radio airs the third Friday of every month. Make an appointment on your calendar and join us for each episode. On behalf of the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeast Wisconsin and all of our affiliate partners and members, I'm Brian Belmer, wishing you happier, healthier days ahead. For more information about research or to listen to the podcast of this or any of our shows on demand, please visit our website at ctsi.mcw.edu. CTSI Discovery Radio is written, produced, and hosted by Brian Belmer in collaboration with WMSE Radio. The CTSI and this program are under the direction of Dr. Reza Shakir.